Yo, it's Arrow. It's been a while, YouTube, but I'm back this time to tell you all I can about automation and envelopes in Reaper. It is easily the most musical aspect of any DAW. And when it comes to DAWs, this is the type of stuff I hear a lot of people say, oh, Reaper can't do X or Y. It's just Reaper can, but people don't know where to find that. So I'm going to show you as much as I can. Obviously, it can't be everything about envelopes in Reaper, but it's as much as I see reasonably necessary for anyone that wants to use the DAW to use, with a few bonuses here and there, in as much of a condensed manner as I see fit. So with that intro out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with this example. Here we have a track that I will probably have out on Bandcamp or whatever by the time you see this video. It was really just supposed to be a 4-chord loop for this tutorial, but you know how it is. I accidentally turned it into a track. If you happen to like it, it's there in the description or whatever. But what you need to hear for now is just the little example with the drum loop here. Again, something random I grabbed a splice and chopped up a little bit. So let's have some fun with it. By default, Reaper gives you 3, or at least 3 important envelopes to work with any track as soon as you make it. So these 3 things are going to be your volume, which is the green one you see there, your pan, the yellow, and there's also width. I never touched this one. I'd rather use a plugin I trust, and you guys won't be able to hear that if you guys are listening like in mono or on your phone, so we're going to ignore that one for now. So to get rid of it, you can clear remove. So if I have points on here, this will also remove it. It also removes it from my site, which is just hiding, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's go ahead and hear on a track with actual things on it what it sounds like when we use our pan envelope. Again, if you're in mono, you won't hear this, but just so the people that are listening in stereo can fulfill their curiosities and see what the pan might sound like, let's go ahead and draw a few points and give this a listen. A little wonky there, as we'd expect. I can draw more points, and if I want to delete these, we have 2 options. I can click on the envelope, right-click, clear, right, and you saw that work a second ago. What I can also do is use my right-click drag. This selected all the points, and then I press delete, and now this envelope is clear just in that area, in case I had some other points other here that I didn't want to disrupt. Cool. So that's their pan. Let's go ahead and listen to the volume. I know everybody's going to be able to hear this one, and I'm going to show you one of our tricks. Let's say for this entire section here, I want this to be a little bit quieter. And this works really well with regions. Like if in this section of the song, I want the drums to be this quiet or this quiet, we can change those very easily. Again, I'm just holding Control Shift and then I drag within a time selection. Very handy to know about. And that also makes it easier to draw things. Like I just removed this one point, click on this one, like left click it, and then delete. And now I have this nice little angle here. I can draw some more points, not be too crazy with it, and let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. Let's say that I like this point, or I have a bigger selection here, or let's say I want this exact amount, but I want it to start at a different place. If I hold Control and Shift and grab this point, it is now vertically locked. So even if I lift up or down, it will always be the same volume here, which is really handy to know when you're messing with these points. Alternatively, I can hold Control Alt, and now it is horizontally locked. I can't move it left or right, but I can change its vertical amount, which is, again, super handy just to be aware of when you're working with these super duper fast. And that's gonna be it for our default envelopes on a track. I'm gonna show you some more tricks we can do with the envelopes, but next on a clip. Cool. I actually want to show you something first, and it's just that if I grab something and I drag it down, I do have a new clip, but there's also the issue of, hey, it also dragged along an envelope with me. That is something you can change in your preferences. We're not going to get into that right now, especially since like when I go to the preferences, I get silenced and I don't want to edit around that. Just be aware of that. You can change in your preferences, so when you copy things, it doesn't copy the envelope as well. So I'm just going to, as you saw, remove that envelope here, And we're going to talk about the envelopes we can have on a clip itself. So the one that's unique for each clip, just like you have for each track, you can add envelopes. Like there's not even add, there's like a envelope or take pitch envelope, there's a take volume envelope, there's a take pan envelope. I think I have a shortcut for the pan. Let's say take pan. And I can pull up the envelope for pan. There's one for width as well. I don't like to do them on individual takes, but that's something to be aware of. The cool one that you're definitely going to be able to hear is our pitch envelope. So let's go ahead and play around with this one real fast. Let's see what that sounds like. Taking that same drum loop you've heard and messing with the pitch. Let's bring it back all the way down here. Make sure it's alone. So pretty cool. We can get some cool effects from that already. Reminder, if you control I, or at least that's a shortcut I have, I'll put the name of that action in there somewhere. You can change the stretch mode, so when you do these pitch changes, it'll actually have a different effect. So let's just try one more real fast. So you're aware. And I know the sound design people in here are already getting some ideas. But there are more ideas to be had when we talk about some of the other cool stuff we can do with our envelopes. So another easy one, I didn't talk about taking our pitch envelope, or taking an envelope, holding Control, and this time we're going to drag our mouse. And this draws a shape as we go here. And this is going to sound kind of gnarly. Let's go ahead and hear it as it is first. We're getting like extra clicks and pops, which we probably don't want. And an easy fix for that, what usually comes in handy, like hand in hand with the drawing, is right clicking on the envelope, and you can say reduce the number of points. And when I bring these down, we're gonna get less and less points. They're gonna make more and more sense over time, right? It's still a little bit jagged. Speaking of jagged though, there's an easy way to change all of the shapes, all of the points we have selected, and that's gonna be a little bit more of a complicated shortcut I'm going to show you in just a minute, but so you can see what that looks like. I can change the shape of all of my points, or one at a time if I want to select just one. Unselect all points. Cool. So if I wanted to change, let's say, just this one, I'm going to delete some points here. And I could change all of these shapes like so, or just this individual shape. Let's talk about how we do that real fast, because this is a really handy, really important shortcut. This one you have to make custom, and it does require one extra thing. So if I look for that shortcut I have attached it to Control and slash, and you can tell it's like new because I use all lowercase and I didn't specify what exactly it is. Even if you edit this one, it's not going to give you much information. Usually it'll tell you the steps in the custom action, and that's because this isn't a regular custom action. This is a cycle action. So to get cycle actions in Reaper, and again, this is a very simple process. It's just you have to be aware of it. There's SWS tools which are made for Reaper. It's a simple add-on extension. I'll put a link in the description to some video that explains it. It takes like 5 minutes, probably less. Once you have these extensions installed, you can open the cycle action editor, and I can look at this one, and you can see what I did. Each of these is an individual step. So in the cycle action, the first step, if I press it once, it'll do this action, and then it'll do this action, and then so on and so forth, and cycle back to the top. So all I have to do is right click on this side right here. I could add a step, right? And then I could add, let's say, I'm gonna insert a action, and it's supposed to select an action, sorry. Action list, and then I can add another one here. So I can say envelope shape, and you'll see I can set it to a Bezier curve, or a square, or a slow start, slow end, or so on and so forth, which is just all the steps I've done here. Once you have that action, again, you can just go into the menu, click on your new action, and set the shortcut by clicking add, and then you choose whatever shortcut you want, and now you have the power to change the shape of all your envelopes simultaneously. Really cool. So I can select all these points real quick. Let's see what the squares sound like. Very, very silly. Cool. Let's go ahead and talk about the envelopes you get when you add on a new effect. So I'm going to show you the old kind of slow way to do it first, and then the faster way, just so you understand what this is when you see it. This is had a major glow up from before. It's far more readable, but still kind of inconvenient for me. There's a lot of clicks necessary, and you have to read a lot of things. So you can see the default envelopes I've already shown you, like the volume, the pan, and the width. If I add an effect on here, and I'm going to add a filter for now. If I click on this trim button again on the track, you're going to see all the parameters I can modulate show up and populate here. And you can click on this to make it active or arm it, and we're going to talk more about what that means later. But you can see the options here. I'm not going to open that window again. What's way faster is just clicking on one of the parameters. So I'm clicking on the cutoff here. I'm going to escape, and then I'm going to press my shortcut, and boom, I have my envelope here for me to mess with and do all the things I showed you can do with an envelope earlier. Let's go ahead and see what happens if I populate this with a couple more. I'm going to click this other option. I'm going to press my shortcut. I'm going to click on this other parameter. I'm going to press my shortcut, and then all of a sudden I have a bunch of envelopes all overlying this media item, and it's really hard for me to see. So what we can do is click on any envelope, and we'll have a shortcut for changing it either to be in its media lane or in a separate one. So for each of these, if I press that shortcut, I'm going to get a lane for each of my envelopes. So I actually don't want to see all of these. I'm going to hide these real quick. There's a shortcut for that as well. And before I forget, there's also a shortcut to show and hide all envelopes across the project you can click, which can be either distracting or very helpful for your workflow, depending on how you like to do things. So let's go ahead and play with those parameters I was talking about before. I'm going to show you some of the options we have built in with what probably looked a little bit mysterious to you, these like options over here. We're going to go through most all of them, at least the ones that I typically use. Some of them I don't use, but we're going to talk about because they may be useful to you. So this enable parameter modulation baseline value, this is talking about what the envelope is right now. How much control do I have to make it move from where it currently is to whatever these other settings are going to change it to. So an audio control signal or a sidechain is kind of what you'd think it is, but instead of ducking volume necessarily, you can tie it to any of the parameters. So I have this little kick here, and I have it sending to 3 and 4. So it's now listening to whenever the kick hits. You're going to see first on the screen and then also on the effect itself, it's actually going to change the cutoff. You can see it bounce in time. Let's say I want it to be more reactive, or I want it to react faster, or if I want to react more, I'll change the max volume down so it looks like it's always blasting it to the max. Right? I can change it higher so it won't go as far. I can change this curve a bit, or a lot, and get different effects. Again, centered means I'm centered around this value and it goes up from here. Negative means whenever I see this, I'm going to go down from whatever the current baseline value is. So I'm going to move that baseline value up. You see it knocking the filter back. And of course you can do positive, which does the opposite. It'll knock the filter up every time the kick hits. And the release is really slow, so let's make it really fast. We'll see it bounce. Cool. So that's the sidechain. It's a little finicky, like or temperamental. It's really hard to get to work exactly the way you want. But the fact that you can map anything to another audio signal is pretty sick. This could be a saturation amount. This could be a compression amount. This could be like, sometimes it can be the bypass, like a toggle on and off for another parameter if you set the settings just right. But we won't go over that one anymore. This one's an LFO, which is exactly what it sounds like, low frequency oscillator, in case you haven't heard that acronym before. And it's just going to oscillate this value. This is actually really cool if you want something to pan around automatically, but you don't want to have to draw in that automation all the way across. Or we're going to talk about making that faster even if you did want to do that. But this is also really cool if you want to make glitchy effects and make it random. And let's make random like really fast. Right? And you'll see it glitch out. You'll hear it glitch out too. Cool. If I want to sync it to the tempo, it's going to jump, let's say, every quarter note. Again, phase, let's say I'm in sine mode, you're going to see it go up and down. If I change phase, it's just saying if I start at this given point, if I start at this given point Am I starting at the top of my sine wave, in the middle of the sine wave, or so on? Usually what you envision to be nice and smooth, like back and forth, is actually the triangle shape, goes up and down. The sine has its own behavior. And square, of course, just jumps from one value to the other. It snaps very quickly. I didn't mention it before, but something you should be aware of: for any envelope that looks like square shaped, there's actually a little bit of magic going on where it bends for, I don't know, it's probably less than like a millisecond. This is something you can change in your preferences. It's just so nothing like pops or snaps when you do these rigid square shapes. Something you can be aware of. I don't know anyone that would really care to change that, but in case you're that type of person and would like to nitpick things to the less than a millisecond, feel free to be aware of that. Cool. The last one is you can link it to other parameters, which means if I had the if I'm changing the cutoff, let's say it's bouncing with my audio signal, my sidechain signal or whatever, and I want the drive to move at the same time by some scale, let's say exactly the same amount, or I want to move whenever the drive goes up, I want the cutoff to go down, or whenever the cutoff goes up, I want the drive to go down. You can change the scale to negative, which means basically you're mapping one parameter to another. So whenever one changes, the other changes. And if you have the first one, let's say C is mapped to B, which is mapped to A, and A is mapped to an LFO, then A and B and C move with the LFO at the same time in some coordination based off of the scales. And I know a lot of you are already having some wild ideas. I can't demonstrate all the things you can do with it, but needless to say, things can get really wild really fast. So those are your options from an effect parameter if you want to mess with the envelopes as we have before. But maybe you don't want to mess with the envelopes that way. Maybe instead, and I'm going to make sure I clear this envelope, I'm going to show you the other option, which people, including myself, quite often use, and it doesn't look like it's actually removed. I'm going to show this envelope, and what I'm going to do is remove all these LFO actions so I can remove it, and rather I will attach it to my MIDI controller over here. So again, click my parameter, escape, and instead of showing the envelope, I'm going to press my other shortcut, and now I have my option to map something to my MIDI controller. I tend to have it on absolute. It depends on how your MIDI controller works. Sometimes relative is better. For me, absolute always works. Toggle is something, if you have something clickable on your MIDI controller, that's useful. Let's say it's a bypass you want to map to something on your MIDI controller. That's pretty handy. Sometimes you might want it to only work when something's selected. So like if you want to perform with Reaper, these options are really, really important to you. For now, we're not going to be too bothered with them. I'm just going to show you the basics of using what they call, it's called MidiLearn, but basically just mapping it to your off-board device. So again, I'm going to open the filter so we can see it, and I'm going to start playing and moving this around in just a second once I make sure it's actually mapped properly. There you go. Turning it up, turning it down. Pretty cool. Now, before I move on to the final segment, there's one more thing I want to demystify here. So you probably noticed one more lane or one more option when we move this off of its media lane. Is this over here? What's this glowing button for? And this is for arming it to record. So again, if I'm using my MIDI controller to move this parameter around, maybe this is how I want to save it. Instead of having to draw it in, I just want to move my knobs, click a few buttons, and have it working at the end of one recording or one pass through. What I can do there is to switch it from, when I have it on default, is trim and read is definitely what you want it to be on. If you're having trouble with envelopes, it's usually because you're in the wrong like read-write mode. 90% of the time, if you want to draw your envelopes, I'd say like 99% or 100% of the time, if you just want to draw your envelopes, just keep it on trim read always. If you instead want to record with a MIDI controller or some other off-board device, you're going to want to switch it to write mode. So when I switch it to write mode, actually before I switch it to write mode, I'm going to press my button for recording, and you're going to say, hey, it's going to notify me, warn me rather, I don't have anything armed for recording, so whatever I do is going to be meaningless. If I instead just switch this to write mode, now when I press that button, it's still going to warn me, but you're going to see I can control this. Again, I'm just moving a knob over in this invisible space you can't see. I have a ton of points again, but I don't want this many points. I can highlight, reduce the number of points, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And then from here, I can do whatever other tricks I wanted to do with the envelope as before. Just so you're aware of that. Make sure to always take things off of write mode, or the next time you try to record something, whether it's the envelopes or just audio, you're going to screw up these very fast. So again, 99% of the time, you just want to have it stuck on trim and read. But if you are the type of person that wants to perform everything, even if you're just trying to save it after you perform it instead of doing it live, then that one option of switching to write mode is going to be helpful for you. Cool. And with that, we're off of all of the main things you can do with the envelopes. There's one more trick I'm going to show you guys. All right, I did say this was a track, and we should probably hear more tracks than just the drums. So I'm just going to show you this 4-bar section so you have a good idea of what we're looking at. Then we're going to focus in on the pads, so I can show you probably one of the most important tricks, but also one of the hardest to find in Reaper when it comes to automation. So really quick preview of the idea. And again, really just a 4-bar loop, 4-chord loop with some stuff for interest. But speaking of adding interest, what we're going to do is we're going to take these pads here. You notice that they're already sidechained. This is a trick that you might see a lot of people do, or you might do yourself when it comes to sidechaining. Let's say that you wanted to, but the attack on your compressors really just doesn't seem like it fits right, and instead you want to draw the shape for the sidechain. Well, it would take quite a long time if I manually drew every single point. Let's zoom in here real quick. And let's say for 1 quarter note, my shape should look like this. I don't want to do that for every single quarter note, and there's no guarantee that they're going to look exactly the same. So what I can do instead is just take this section right here, and I'm going to press my shortcut to create an automation item, which is what Reaper calls these little objects of envelopeness that you can move around. If I wanted to duplicate that, there's also a shortcut for that, and bada bing, bada boom. I now have this shape on my filter, and let's go ahead. I want a bigger, more dramatic change. So let's see if I can just bump this up. And again, right now it's still partly attached. It's kind of a long story. We'll talk in a second about how it's kind of attached to the rest of the envelope. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. You're going to notice as I combine them, some extra points are going to be added in the process. But let's go ahead and hear what it sounds like as is with our little automation. If I want to save that, I just highlight all of my automation items, and then I do this shortcut to glue them to the underlying envelope. And you'll notice again, there's a couple of extra points depending on how they're like slid together. They're usually easy to clean up, and remember you can always highlight and then remove unnecessary points. But let's get them back to the automations they are. And let's say I really don't like the shape. I forgot. We can change the envelope shapes. And I meant to have it look something more like this. Well, that's not helpful. I already made all of these others, and they're not changing as well, which is going to make this a little bit more complicated, which is why there's a separate function, a separate action, I should say, for duplicating and what they call pooling them. So if I instead press this shortcut to duplicate them, and I edit this one envelope, you're going to notice they're all changing together. So now I can do whatever modifications I want and have all of these have the same behavior. If I don't, I simply just press a separate separate shortcut. So again, I'm gonna change all of these. The last one's not gonna change. Really, really handy. So let's go ahead and just try something else and see what sounds cool. I kind of want to flip that backwards. Let's see what it sounds like if I do a little bit of this. So I'm just having fun here. Move all of them. And those are our tricks for our automation items. Of course, I didn't pick the coolest shape at the end, but I'm literally displaying here. Something you should also know about these automation items is you can actually save them as a file, and then you can load these automation items on other envelopes. I'd never taken the time to do that or cared to, so just so you're aware, just right click, there's save, and there's load, and of course you can make shortcuts for either of these if you're the type to just have some saved automation shapes. But with all of that out of the way, let's end the video. Thanks for showing up. Hope I could help you with a couple of Reaper things. Check out the Discord if you want some other Reaper heads or just music people to chat with. Always trying to make that a bigger, better community. And stay cool, everyone. I'll catch you later.